And then the third is new business models entirely. And this is when you look at your existing business, but you think this technology can actually create a brand new business for you. One of the best examples, and we see a lot of this in the internet, there's a lot of disruptive technologies that appear, and they will completely change a business model. A great example is Amazon and how they disrupted booksellers in the 90s and into the 2000s. They essentially disrupted physical bricks and mortar business model of selling books and went with a virtual model and had a really huge impact on that business. So a newer example of using IoT technology is the company called Nest. Recently, Nest sold to Google for a few $1 billion. It seems like a really high price tag for what is essentially a thermostat that goes in your home. So you might wonder about why the value of that company was so high. It didn't have a lot to do with the hardware. The real value that Google saw in that company was that each piece of hardware that was in somebody's house was connected to the internet and gathering data about how people used energy day to day and month over month. And they realized that that data was the most valuable thing about that company, not the actual product. And so what they've done is they've taken the data created by the Nest thermostats and they've used that to sell it as a service and a business intelligence tool to utilities companies. Utility companies have a real issue with trying to understand how much energy they need to create for the market that's consuming it. The challenge is there's spikes in energy demand all the time, and they need to figure out, do we have enough power plants to actually deal with that? So they need to make a decision, do we actually go out and build a new multi-billion-dollar power plant, get it all built, get it ready, and then find out that we never turn it on because the demand that we thought was going to appear actually never showed up. Or they make the wrong decision and they don't build the power plant and the power spikes and we have brownouts and blackouts. So either scenario isn't very good. One, you have very angry customers and you have services being dropped. The other, you spend a lot of money and never actually use the infrastructure. So they started purchasing the data that's coming from the Nest thermostats to help them make better decisions and decide whether or not that $1 billion investment is worth their while and whether or not that's going to actually impact the service around their clients.
And this device is used to take as input the sensor data and then turn that sensor data into a meaningful message that we can relate to people. So me, I can read this message that the gateway is going to produce, and it makes sense to me. That gateway is then going to have to transmit that message over the internet to our next building block, which is our database. So the gateway performs two functions. First, it messagizes, if you will, the information from the sensor. The next important building block is our analytics block. And the analytics block is the portion of our building block diagram that performs the calculations on the data that we've collected. So in our previous example, the individual walks into the room and the lights turn on. The sensor detects the presence of the individual. That gets transmitted to our database, but it's the analytics that recognizes that that has been triggered. So this is a very simple analytic algorithm to register that somebody's walked into a room, but we can envision a more complicated analytic algorithm where, for example, because we're able to know when the lights are being turned on and turned off in a building, we can then predict when specific lights are going to burn out. And that is a predictive maintenance algorithm that you can perform. So the analytics building block is a very critical part of this whole system. More complicated situation with respect to a preventative maintenance example is to decide when to change out the light bulbs. So for example, the analytic building block might say, our light's going to burn out next Tuesday. The decision made is it to go in on that Tuesday and change out the light bulb, or do we go in before and change out the light bulb? Knowing when something's going to happen should influence our decision about how to react to it or influence that. So it's not just doing whatever the analytics says, it's about making good decisions about what the analytics is informing us.